you so much, Sid, for the introduction. So, we've learned all about how to, the benefits of no code, as well as how to revitalize the field service industry for these changing times. So, now let's learn how to plan solutions for the field service industry. So, well, to begin, there are many different kinds of business applications that you can build on Steer, such as business apps, or internal processes for finance, perhaps reimbursement, or lining up your suppliers for procurement. You can do that on Steer. You can also do apps that engage with organizations and people that are not part of your organization. So, for example, it could be partner accreditation, for example, or it could also be your customers. So, receiving requests or feedback from your customers so you can build apps like those that would cater to them. Okay. But for now, let's focus on a specific business case that I think would interest a lot of those who are in this industry, which would be, for example, parts releasing management. So with parts releasing, there are, well, literally lots of moving parts during the process. So you need to make sure that you have an updated inventory. You need to make sure that you have enough stock of some particular parts that may be very specialized and hard to come by. So you need to make sure that you have some on hand. You need to make sure as well that these items are properly tracked. For example, when you are sending out technicians out to the field and you need to know which part did I give to which technician, why did he get it or why did they get it? Who will be paying for that? Is it the appropriate item that I have allowed that person to check out? So those questions and those concerns can be addressed if, let's say, we build a hypothetical parts releasing um, app on Steer. So the first thing that you need to do when you're building or planning to build a solution on a no-code platform is to, number one, well, you have to plan it, and then afterwards you'll have to build your records, and then build the workflow, and then afterwards would be to test and roll out the app or the set of apps to see if the the apps that you have built is complete, and if there are improvements that have to be made on the workflow side or on the record side. So I'd say that planning the solution is actually like pretty much 90% of the process before you move on to actually building it, and to, of course, make better iterations of the app with the evolving needs of perhaps your business users or even your customers or whoever will be submitting requests or tickets on the app. So, how do we go about planning the solution? So, the first thing that we need to do when we are planning the solution would be to identify the modules that you would need. I will be drilling down on each portion of these steps in planning the solution later on. And then afterwards, you guys will also try a bit of a hands on how to build these apps, as another related app on Steer. Okay. So we'll first have to identify the modules that you need for the app. And then afterwards, each module that you have identified, you will now classify it whether it is a record or a workflow. Now, once you have classified whether it's a record or a workflow, we need to identify who will be using the app and their appropriate access rights. And then afterwards, we need to identify any possible automation points or things that we can automate or things that where we can integrate with. And then lastly would be to identify reports for especially for decision makers. So let's start with identifying modules. What do we mean when we say identifying modules? So identifying modules is a bit similar um, to gathering the needs of the business users. In agile methodology, these are like the user stories that would translate to specific modules or features in an app or a program that you'd usually develop. So we can start by asking questions that what are the things that you expect a user to do? So, would they have to maintain a set of information related to what they're trying to do? Do they need to go through a process where they need to review or approve a request? Would they have to check where each request or ticket is at any particular step or stage in the workflow? So those are questions that you can ask to help you identify what kinds of modules you'll need to do. So in our use case for parts management, so maybe as someone who's head of managing the inventory, I'd probably need an app that will help me maintain my list of information regarding parts. I'll also probably need to get a create a workflow that would allow me to manage who is checking in and who is checking out the parts, right? And I also need to create another workflow, or I need to participate in another workflow that would allow me to request for new parts if I see that my parts, specific parts are on low supply. So next is we classify each module, whether they are a record or a workflow. So I've been mentioning records and workflows earlier, but maybe workflows might be a bit more familiar to you, but not so much records. So what are records? So essentially records are a set of information that can be presented as either a form or a table like an Excel sheet to maintain or to add or to update information. So usual usual types of records would be inventory, could be your customer list, your partner list. So lists or sets of information, or for example, employee list or asset list, or maybe student records, for example. Those are just examples of records. Whereas workflows is when there are decisions that have to be made, whether specifically or um, so if you're making something that would involve reviews or approvals. Okay. So now that we have set up whether they are records or processes, the next step would be to identify your users, their access levels, and the modes. So what are your uh, we need to first identify who are the people who will be participating or using these apps, and how will they be using these apps. So for example, you need to ask what kind of information does each user need to um, to perhaps process or to um, think. We need also need to think about what are the information that they would need to provide as input, for example. So maybe um, maybe a customer would be requesting for a replacement of a part for example, their defective aircon. So they're probably the user who will have to request that for that particular item. And then um, you will have to, it would probably go through an approval process. And then afterwards, it gets added to the record, for example. So that user needs to add the information to the process so that the process can get started and move on through the different steps to maybe procurement or maybe straight to servicing. We also need to ask, where is the information coming from? So you need to consider, will the information about the parts come from an external system, maybe the ERP and the accounting system perhaps? Would the information be coming manually as an input by the users? Or maybe it's a combination of both. So there's probably a part of the form that already that comes from some external system, and then another part of the form is manually added by the user. Now we also need to ask, who needs to process the information in what way? Do they just need to view the information? Do they need to see all of the information that's coming in for the request or the ticket, or perhaps only a part of it? They probably maybe, for example, field technicians might not need to see how much. After you have identified your users, the access levels, and the modes, the next step in planning your solution would be to identify your workflow steps to integrate or automate. So we can probably now start asking which information can be used to create logic. So by logic, we mean that whether some steps be rewritten as logic. So for example, if someone creates request for a um, a request for a thing, or for a part rather, and it's not available, then you can probably set logic that it is automatically denied up until the part comes in. So that definitely shortens the whole approval process, and it frees up your parts manager, for example, to focus on other things. Okay? So you can also probably identify other steps wherein you can start connecting your systems to make sure that it's a smooth workflow wherein there's no um, loss of information, or that the information that you have received from your customer is consistent all the way through. Okay. So once you have identified your workflow steps for integration and automation, the last step would be to identify report elements. So you need to identify the information that decision makers need in order to make sure that they are able to review the process, or um, review different parts of the operations to see whether they are optimized, what can be improved. So you need to decide what are the information needed, and where would the information come from to build that report. So again, whether would it be within the system, or would it be coming from outside of the system, which the system would call to just create that basic report, right? So now that you have all of these information, it would be it's time for you to start building the application. So building your records, building your the workflow based on this, and then building your reports.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and more importantly, your interest throughout the session. And I hope that you had a great learning experience in the breakout in the breakout room where some of the steer experts could possibly be there with you and help you answer some of your questions or concerns that you might have in general about no code or otherwise also in terms of how you can probably build a digital ecosystem around the kind of solutions you're trying to build. So I think just to wrap up, I'll take a few more minutes. For field service, I think it's important to be able to be future ready and to probably sell fast. So bringing your end-to-end sales order processing online and swiftly to adapt to the new normal of doing business, and all of it, we can have a lot of it inbuilt into some of the modules from Steer, which could start as low as only $50 per month, which is annual billing. And it gives you a lot of add-ons, including the public access license, the third party web store builder, in-house premium support. You have Microsoft Azure hosting, so you can be assured of complete reliability, no latency issues, and any other uh, modules which are already pre-built into Steer. So these are some of the, I would say, features which you can get access to using Steer platform. But for a more detailed, I would say, perhaps a demo, you can reach out to all of us. So by the end of today, if you are able to register on Steer platform, you will get about $100 off for on support services. So you can actually get across to Steer support consultants to be able to help you configure your process. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask us or reach out to us. One of my colleagues will be sharing a Calendly link. Please feel free to drop in a message in case you do have um, a follow-up meeting which you would want to set to talk to one of our customer success teams or the tech development teams as such. With this, I thank you so much for your presence today. I appreciate you taking out the time on a Friday evening and afternoon to listen to us and to learn more about what no code platform is and how it could potentially help you with your business.